Hello, welcome to Spotlight, eclipsed by nothing when it comes to creative loveliness.
Spotlight, brought to you by the Isle of Man Arts Council.
This evening, we hear about a new book detailing Douglas past and present. Some fascinating poetry workshops in prison run by the IOM Poetry Society. And it is, of course, the eclipse this evening, so what better way to celebrate than in poetry? Remember, do get in touch with any creative artistic endeavours you might be involved in, planning, hoping to create, or would really like to put in the spotlight when it's not eclipsed, which it never is. Poetic, theatrical, musical, literary, ceramic, sculpture, drag, film, social media, opera. There is some Manx opera coming up, very exciting. Drop me a line, Howard Kane with an E at manxradio.com, spotlight at manxradio.com. Let's get you featured on the programme, particularly if you've never been on before. Lovely to have new voices and new artistic projects featured. Well, we have often spoken to Sarah Goodwins on this programme, either with her bardic hat on, she was the fourth Manx bard, you might remember, once a bard, always a bard, or her own hat, as happily she's a committed hat wearer, which is always good to see. Or perhaps her professional hat from her company Lockton Books. But whether her professional hat is different from her own, I confess I've never asked her. It's with her Lockton Books hat on, though. She popped up to the Spotlight studio the other day to tell me about their latest publication, the second volume of Douglas in their Past and Present series, which gives a fascinating glimpse into how our capital city has changed over the generations, with changing times, cultures, economies, and of course living standards. Juxtaposing old photos of the city, hard though it might be for me to think of it as a city still, but there we are, with informative texts and descriptions. I asked her how the books had come about.
It's one of the few books that we've had that's actually fought us all the way through. Doug 2 has been difficult to get copyright clearance. Some of the old photographs were badly captioned. I should say that part of this was probably my own fault because the two books were planned together and I knew we wanted to get volume 1 out just before Christmas, so anything that looked a bit tricky I stuffed into volume 2, so the fact that it was tricky to do is probably my fault. Well, we have done a number in the past. We've done Castletown, Peel, Port Erin, Ramsey. And the obvious one to do was Douglas. And the reason we hadn't done Douglas before is because Douglas is huge. And we didn't feel we could do justice to Douglas in just one book. But doing 2 seemed to be rather a lot of work. And then basically we ran out of other places to do. So we thought, OK, we'll do Douglas, but we'll do it as 2 volumes. And we'll plan the 2 volumes together so that there's not that much overlap. I mean, there's a little bit of overlap. You can't do a book about Douglas and not include the Tynwald building or not include the horse trams or something. But you'll get different pictures and they will have different information attached to them. So there's as little overlap between the 2 as we can manage, which is, hopefully we've succeeded in that. It's been a lot of work.
I bet the incredible amount of work. And so you've actually covered a fair amount of the sort of major conurbations of the island now with doing the places that have been done so far.
We have, yes. There are others that we could do, but we probably won't do. We're thinking that probably this one is the last one that we will do of this type, because the obvious one to do next is Laxey, but there are other historians who write about Laxey. We don't want to tread on toes. Port St Mary has been done by Russian Heritage. And then we've got things like Kirkmichael, Jerby, Bride, Andreas, all that. But there are no shops there. And we are a commercial organisation, so we need somewhere to be able to sell it. And it does actually make a difference. It's surprising how much of a difference it makes. Of the ones we've done, Castletown is the one that sells least successfully, because the only place in Castletown that sells it is the castle.
Of course, yes.
So it's surprising how much difference not having local shops or local people stocking it does make.
And the old photos, again, by Ray Stanfield. So who was he then? Who was Ray?
Ray is a collector of old photographs, old postcards. He used to be a coxswain in the RNLI Ramsey lifeboat. And I think he's retired now, but I think he's also done gardening work and various things. But his main interest is old photographs of the Isle of Man. He's got an enormous collection, and he very kindly lends us the photographs that we use for this sort of book. It's slightly sad that you'll notice at the beginning it's the only book of the Past and Present series that has a dedication in it, because Ray's wife Shirley died while we were putting it together, and she really liked the Past and Present books. So it's a shame. She was a nice lady.
And as you point out in sort of the some of the publicity, what a lot of people don't maybe think about, which I sort of vaguely knew, and then you just reminded me when I was reading it, that an awful lot of the old part of Douglas was sort of completely demolished in the 1930s.
Yes, that was interesting, because this is where we come back to having quite a lot of tricky work to do. We've got, say, 8 or 9 really, really interesting photographs of very old streets that were crooked and windy and have got amazing buildings in. But they were the slums of the time, and so they were cleared in the 30s. And now it's literally just a car park. It's where the old bus station used to be, not far from the sea terminal, and it's completely flat. So all these small streets have just completely gone. So we could have put 9 photographs of a car park in as matching photographs, but we've had to try and be creative to get modern equivalents. I mean, for example, one of them was Almshouses Lane. I think it's Almshouses Lane, not Almshouses Road. And there's a wonderful photograph of almshouses. Well, we've matched that with the food bank. It's not in the same place, but it's the same sort of thing. Neighbours are in need, and therefore this is a building that helps people who are in need. So we've had to match by topic rather than by geography sometimes, which we had to be slightly creative, I should say.
Yeah.
I mean, another one is Seneschal Lane. We've matched Seneschal Lane with the inside of the Tynwald building, because they're not in the same place, not at all, but Tynwald has a seneschal. So we've tried to explain to people what is a seneschal and why was Seneschal Lane called that in the first place. So as I say, it's a match by topic rather than geography. I mean, we do have a couple of photographs of the car park.
Well, you've got to really, haven't you?
Yeah.
And I think that's the incredible thing, that parts of town are completely and utterly different, and then other parts haven't actually changed that much, I suppose.
No, they haven't. There are a few photographs in the book where you look at the modern one and you look at the old one. Apart from the fact the modern one's in colour, they're almost exactly the same. And there have been some areas. For example, there's a photograph of, I think it's the Regency Hotel. That's the modern photograph, and it used to be the Waverley years ago. And the one end of a terrace, if you like, a Victorian terrace, or possibly Edwardian, no, I think it was Victorian, still exists, but the rest is modern. But it all sort of blends. So that works quite nicely. But it is sad that some of the old places, I mean, they were slums, but if they'd been... if they'd survived to now, they would be really characterful houses which would be loved and looked after.
Well, funnily enough, I was thinking exactly that. On the one hand, there's absolutely no doubt that Douglas is obviously a much more modern city as it is deemed now, and clearly is much more hygienic. And again, from what I've read, some parts of old Douglas were totally unhygienic and were really almost sort of cesspits. So I think we've moved on in the right direction. But yeah, I was thinking that. I mean, do you think that sort of Douglas has lost character over the years with the rebuilding?
I do. I must admit, that's a personal opinion. Other people would disagree, but I do. I think there are some parts of Douglas where you think, why did they knock the old buildings down and put up this, whatever it is? And I do think that, because part of the joy of the Isle of Man is that we are different. You come here and it is different to the UK, where some of the buildings they're putting up now, or have done in the past, they're not actually different. So we just look like everywhere else, which is a pity.
Yes, I think it is. Well, it's terrific. It's a great book just to flip through, as I've been doing as we've been talking. And yeah, look at that sort of the House of Keys and the Tynwald building there. I see hardly changed really when you look at those two pictures, do they? They're both very, very similar, other than the fact one's in black and white and one in colour. And that's the terrific thing, I think, as you flip through it. Whenever you're looking through books of old photographs, you instantly are thinking, what's it sort of like now in that area? Yeah. So it's great to actually have, as you say, the sort of the old and the new side by side, pretty much to do the comparison. Yeah.
I mean, that's one of the reasons that we love doing them. It's because you learn a lot, obviously, but you also think, gosh, it used to be like this. Look what it's like now. And it's not. I mean, there are things that I think, it's sad that it's not like that anymore. But there are some things where I think, Well, that's better, isn't it?
Yes.
We've got that right.
We've gone in the right direction.
Yeah.
You mentioned where to get them. So this one, obviously, there's plenty of shops hopefully in Douglas. So where can people pick up this Volume 2, Douglas Past and Present?
Well, they can get it in Douglas. They can get it in the Book Company, mostly Manx, and from the Manx National Heritage sites. If outside Douglas, Bridge Bookshop in Ramsey and Port Erin have it, and also the Manx National Heritage sites round the island. And there are one or two gift shops that have it as well. So we're still trying to persuade people to take it.
And you say you think this is probably the last in this series?
Probably. We might be persuaded to do others. But as I say, the part of the problem is that we need to be able to sell them somewhere. And we learned from the Castletown one that just being a magnificent area or a lovely part of the island isn't enough. It's got to have some shops as well. But possibly Laxey, I don't know.
It's a fascinating tome to dip into, very readable, very dippable, lots of fantastic photographs and the descriptions as well, giving you a feel of how Douglas once was and, of course, seeing how it now is. And, of course, while lots of areas have changed beyond recognition, there are some which have hardly changed at all over the last 120 years or more. Great to see.
Spotlight, brought to you by the Isle of Man Arts Council.
We spoke to Bethany Dilly-Runciman and Roger Bloor from the Isle of Man Poetry Society some weeks back when they told us that one of their forthcoming projects was they were going to run workshops at the Isle of Man prison. Well, I invited them back to tell us how they went. They have now taken place, and so here they are back in the studio. And how did they go?
The Manx Lottery Trust run a scheme of thematic funding, and the latest one was had a tagline of "Turn the Tide." So Roger and I put our heads together, and we wondered whether it was possible to go into the prison, do some workshops, and turn the tide against lack of education. Turn the tide so that they can feel poetry, have a go at some poetry. So I then got in contact with the lady who organises the education, and she was very keen to have us come in. So initially we'd hoped to do men and women, but there are few female prisoners, so we were with some of the male prisoners, and it's gone really well.
We ran 6 sessions altogether and got a mixture of people attending, all of whom were enthusiastic and joined in. And from our point of view, it was really good fun. And we did feedback sheets for them, and I think they all enjoyed it and found it useful.
Yeah. So Roger put together a worksheet for both of us, and then another separate one for the prisoners. So we decided to have a theme for each week. So we had strength and resilience. We had a look at some of the romantic poets. We had a look at Poe and Longfellow poets, and we had I've never seen it before, but a Tricolour poem as well, and some romantic poems. So it gave us a good idea about how to run the workshop, and it was the rooms that you do the education in are they have the whiteboards. It's laid out, so you can. What we used to do was get the prisoners to think of words and generate a word bank on the whiteboard, and then from then start to build up a little bit of a poem. Yeah, we did have some people who struggled a bit with the English, and we had some people who were brilliant at poetry. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So real mixture of abilities. Yeah.
Were you surprised, Roger, at the response you got? Because I suppose you might think, and I don't know quite why, but you might think taking poetry into a prison environment might not necessarily get a good response.
Yeah, I think we weren't sure about what the response would be, but it's voluntary. They've turned up, and the feedback's really interesting because they ranged from, well, it gets us out of the cell and it's something to do, to, well, I'm enjoying this and I think I'll probably write some more. And other people who'd written poetry before they were in prison and now had a chance to talk about it and write it and to develop their skills. So the response was pleasant, but also I think encouraged us. Perhaps we want to try and do this again, get another set of sessions. And we gave the guys a choice of what they'd like to do next time, and it ranged from talking about Edgar Allan Poe to John Cooper Clarke, which showed a massive range of interest in poetry and two very different poets. One thing that was consistent in the feedback, one thing they all really enjoyed, we got them to join in and write a communal poem, and they're called exquisite corpse poems. So each poet writes a line but doesn't know what the poet before them has written. So you're getting line after line of theoretically disconnected lines of poetry, which interestingly all came together to make some really interesting words. And the themes that they followed they started off with themes about being in prison, but then as we got further into the sessions, I think developed into more interesting. I can read you one of the exquisite ones if you like.
I'd be
very
delighted,
short.
yeah. Love to hear it.
So, because remember, this is just a line taken at random from someone who's given us a line, and they didn't know how it was going to finish up. So, the end of the tunnel revealed, life still worth living after it's burned. I'm sat in this cell, I can't see a thing, except for the darkness, this darkness within. Inside there's a swarm, even after the storm. Inside me here is fire. So I stoke up the flame, wake up my desire. I return very bright, I nearly burnt.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's actually surprisingly sort of empathetic, and I don't know, it works very well, doesn't it?
It does, yeah.
Yeah. The men were very in tune with each other, which is how we get some wonderful poems that do make sense, despite the fact they've come from 7 different people.
Yeah.
The numbers varied. I think that's one of the problems, the demands on the prisoners about getting out of the cells and getting up there meant that sometimes we were lower numbers. Mm-hmm. But actually it was the most enthusiastic ones who managed to get themselves.
Yeah, we were battling with work as well, because in the prison they get paid for doing work. So if they're cleaning the wing, they get paid for it. They don't get paid for going to education.
Of course.
So that is a big problem. But there's lots of education going on. There's arts, crafts, pottery, computers. They all have access on computers, so to do things. It was quite bizarre. The first time we went, we had prisoners came in, and then we were locked in the room with them. And we were told if any problems, just bang on the window. But it was just quite bizarre being locked in a room. But the prison staff had to know where they were.
Yes,
but there'd be a member of staff sat outside.
And I suppose, again, it's sort of, obviously a good exercise from your point of view and working with the poetry. And from their point of view, again, I suppose it's therapeutic in many ways. The same, you hear yoga sessions and other elements going on there.
Yeah.
If you've landed up in prison, chances are you might be at a very low ebb in your life. And this is something, as remarked in there, it's talking about light at the end of the tunnel and something that you can rebuild.
But besides the poetry, what was also going on was almost like a therapy session. I remember one where there were 2 people who were discussing about turning their lives around. Yes. One person saying, I'm not going to prison again, I'm going to turn my life around. So we quite often be talking to prisoners about the thing outside things. The prisoners also, at first, they were certainly very talking about inside the prison. I thought, oh no, we mustn't talk about the prison. They weren't going to want to talk about the prison, but it was all they talked about was the prison. But we had one poet who said that he didn't want to write about the prison because of that, so he wanted to write about other things, which was really nice.
Yeah. So an exercise you're intending to repeat at some stage,
maybe?
I
think, we'd like to, and certainly...
it'd be with different men. So we'll put in the funding for next year, and next year run the workshops again, definitely. The lady who runs the education was very pleased with what we'd done, and she's very keen to have us again.
Brilliant. Well, I think an excellent idea, and like I said, just the short poem there, you think it's, amazing. I think what might have come out of that must have been fascinating. Other workshops coming up. There's some other work obviously going on with the Poetry Society outside of the work you've been doing in the prisons recently.
We've got, still as part of the grant, we're working in schools, got 6 sessions in schools.
So we were doing Swifts with Manx BirdLife in Victoria Road School in Castletown, which led to poems being generated, and then we went to Paulson Park for a Sunday afternoon, and I had an idea of pegging the poems up on clothes errors, and that worked well, despite a little bit of wind. Occasionally they fall over, but so it was just a way of the public being able to come and read some of the poems, and I was doing that with Sarah Lockyer as well, one of our poets. So we've got in September we're going to Russian Primary School, and in October we're going to Port St Mary Primary School to do similar sort of thing. Themes for Russian will be autumn, and theme for Port St Mary will be the books the class books they're reading. So we'll take themes from there.
And it's lovely just to sow this sort of idea of poetry and the fun you can have with poetry. You get in there at an early age, and it's something that's far more likely, I suppose, the children to develop a passion for poetry as they grow older.
And we've got some adult workshops. So we have an adult workshop on the 19th of September. Michael Manning is running it for us at the Windsor Cafe, and there are 10 places available for that, and you can access those through our website at www.isleofmanpoetrysociety.org. And he's going to be, I think, generating some really interesting poems from that. And then we have some more workshops planned in the future as well.
Brilliant. We'll talk more about those closer to the time. But before we finish today, there was also, I can't believe it's that time again, but also looking forward to the Poetry Trail.
Yes, we've got that coming on. We've also got National Poetry Day on Thursday the 1st of October, and we also have our poetry pop-ins, which we've changed to Friday evenings now, and the next one is towards the end of August. I can't remember the date, but all our
where
dates.
Are they normally? Are they at the
Archibald Knox meeting room? Yeah. So everything's on our website and our Facebook page as well.
So the Poetry Trail opens on the 1st of September again and closes on the 1st of December, and then the Poetry Trail itself runs 13th of February next year onwards at sites all the way around Douglas. And this year, once that's finished, we're planning, we haven't got it finalised yet, to take it on a tour around the island.
Brilliant.
So it can be in other places across the island as well.
And also, Roger introduced a QR code onto the posters. So when you see a poster with the Poetry Trail on, go onto the QR code and you'll see the poet reading their poem.
Terrific.
That was a lovely idea.
Endless admiration for the constant imagination you have for presenting poetry and bringing it to different sectors of the community. So much going on all the time. And as Bethany and Roger said there, if you want to find out more, go to the website. All the details are there. And do have a go at the Poetry Trail, because it's great fun. And, if you get your work up on the windows, that you could be touring the island. Who knows what passion it'll be. Thank you very much indeed, and we'll talk again soon.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Howard.
Loving the idea of the Poetry Trail Tour. Great stuff. They're always so imaginative and active at the Isle of Man Poetry Society. Poetry's never been in a better place on the Isle of Man, in my humble opinion. And speaking of which, well, you may or may not have noticed it's slightly darker outside at the moment than it usually is at this time of the day. Fear not, though, the end of the world is not nigh. It is, of course, the eclipse, which I dare say you might have heard about. And whilst preparing this week's old news podcast on the same theme, eclipses and how they've featured in the press over the years, it's also broadcast Sunday morning, by the way, during Tom Kane's programme Old News, somewhere between 8 and 8:30. Do try it out, it's very good, I'm told. Well, anyway, I came across a little poem written by a reader of the Isle of Man Examiner on the occasion of the solar eclipse of 1942. Well, I'll read you that in a moment, but I also came across another eclipse poem whilst I was sort of fertling around, which wasn't actually in the papers, but I just rather liked it. I thought I'd share it with you to mark this auspicious occasion. We don't get that many eclipses, do we? It's much more recent, this poem, having been penned in 2021 by author, musician and poet Peter Halstead, and he just called it Eclipse. All of us must know the lengths the sun must go to turn the morning into night. In other ways, we trust the sky with the unprotected eye for its extravagant display of mystery and naivete. But now cows lie down, birds don't fly, bees rest silent in their hives, and just the shadow of the day survives, as for an hour we live our clouded lives in the borrowed power of a distant satellite, as the moon swirls nearer to erase the morning. Weather is a mirror of a warning that what the earth has done, the sky will do. In the blinders that we wear to mask the sight-run the spectacles of spring's repeating right. In the end, the world comes out again. The darkening of the moon, now transfigured lawn, which like all the summer blooms again as bright as dawn. But may those infinite sublimities arm our innocence against these sunny lunar forgeries, false fires that the stars imply, lest we trust the simulated spark of day without our glasses, and burn our eyes on what passes for the dark. Is he talking about perhaps taking care of the earth, and indeed not burning your eyes? Please don't burn your eyes. The 1942 poem, much shorter, tongue-in-cheek, is just credited to one Neotis. The sun's eclipse. The eclipse of the sun was very poorly done by the moon on Thursday afternoon. The glare was too strong to bear, and I didn't think the sun even seemed to shrink. With a note underneath from the editor in brackets, there was a partial eclipse of the sun yesterday afternoon, in case no one had noticed. I like it. A man after my own heart, or woman indeed, Neotis. I hope you've enjoyed the eclipse safely wherever and however you are watching it, but that's about it for now. We'll be hearing about Litfest next week, among other joys. See you then. In the meantime, be good, of course, and whatever you're doing, be creative about it. Hemo.